As we embark upon our walk down memory lane for some of us, and for others, an introduction to the origins of the origins of and contributions to the community of the featured African American churches that are here tonight, let us be mindful of the history of African Americans in this country and the impact that our churches have had on all aspects of society. The topic for this evening is the celebration of historic African American churches in Arlington. Each of the churches here tonight observed their 150th anniversaries last year, during the year of 2016. Those are Calloway United Methodist Church, under the pastorate of Reverend Shenda Ennis Lee, Lomax A.M.E. Zion Church, under the pastorate of Reverend Samuel Whitaker, and Mount Zion Baptist Church, under the pastorate of Dr. Leonard N. Smith. And Dr. Smith could not be with us tonight because he's been ill. So he's with us in spirit. Each of these churches was founded in 1866. It is well documented in history that many of the African American churches in this country were founded during that year, 1866, the year in which the slaves were emancipated or granted their freedom. By way of background to this topic, it is important to understand that the events that occurred in our country during that year, the year in which the slaves were emancipated or granted their freedom, set the stage for the origins of these churches. Let us recount some of them. On April 9th, 1866, the Civil Rights Act of 1866 was passed by Congress over the veto of then President Andrew Johnson. This act declared that all persons born in the United States were now citizens without regard to race, color, or previous condition, meaning no prior condition of slavery or involuntary servitude. The act specifically defined the rights of citizens. On July 9th of 1866, the 14th Amendment to the Constitution was ratified, which granted citizenship to all persons born or naturalized in the United States, which included the former slaves. On August 4th of 1866, then President Andrew Johnson formally declared the end of the American Civil War. The end of the Confederacy signaled freedom for millions of Southern Negroes, which was the term used during that time, and promoted the emancipation of the African American church. Thus started the emergence of the African American Christian church as a separate institution. In African American history, the church has long been at the center of our communities. Organized politically and spiritually, African American churches were relied upon to address the specific issues which affected their church members. They have always represented their religion, communities, and homes. Scholars have repeatedly asserted that African American history and the African American church history overlap enough to be virtually identical. Each of the churches participating tonight have a rich history in the Arlington community, which will be shared on tonight. First, we would like to, we've already acknowledged the presence of pastors and ministers here and of Reverend Monica Hargrove, who's the elder for the Northern Virginia District. Let me also say to you that the program tonight is being taped by the Arlington Independent Media. So we are really delighted to have the three churches participating on the panel tonight. And again, we have Sandra Green from Calloway United Methodist Church. Sandra is a native Arlingtonian. Sandra, would you please raise your hand for those who don't know? Thank you. Sandra is a native Arlingtonian who grew up in Halls Hill or Arlington Terrace. Is that correct? Highview Terrace, Highview Park, Obviously, I didn't grow up there. Okay, Highview Park, now known as Highview Park. She is a lifelong member of Calloway United Methodist Church. She retired after more than 30 years from the Arlington County Department of Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Resources. She has been involved with many projects targeted to preserve the Black history of Highview Park. Sharing their memories of growing up in Halls Hill, she collaborated with Marymount University for students of their history department to spend a semester researching the history of Highview with a videotape featuring their research as their final project. She worked with professional artists and a group of Highview Park teens to produce a mural depicting significant events, people, and places in Highview Park, and worked with the Park Division to create a new playground at Langston with play equipment designed to honor special places in the community. Shortly before she retired, she worked with staff to design a new gateway into the community. This project features a sculpture designed by a professor of art at Howard University, who also grew up in Highview Park. Additionally, the project features a wall with more than 800 bricks engraved by residents of Highview Park. Her most recent project includes working with the Historic Preservation Program of Arlington in an effort to seek designation for the cemetery at Calloway United Methodist Church. I just have too much Baptist ingrained in me. I've been Baptist all my life, obviously. Okay. To seek designation for the cemetery at Calloway United Methodist Church as an Arlington Historic District. She's been married to David Green, who is a member of Mount Zion Baptist Church. I didn't get that wrong. For 48 years and has 2 daughters and 2 grandchildren.
Good evening. In 1866, a small group of residents who resided in the vicinity of Halls Hill came together for a prayer meeting at the home of a Mr. Samuel Smith. Mr. Smith's home was located on Sagmiller's Farm, which is the present location of Knights of Columbus on Little Falls Road. As soon as enough money was raised, they purchased a small plot of land in the 4800 block of Lee Highway. And if any of you all know Lee Highway near Halls Hill, that's in the vicinity of Moore's Barbershop and the Merchant Tire. And they built a modest church there. In 1904, as the membership grew, there was a need for a larger church. So the trustees of Calloway negotiated a trade with Mr. Moses Jackson, who was a member of the church. And they traded land. Mr. Moses Jackson took 4800 block of Lee Highway and gave the church 5000 Lee Highway, the current site of the church. At that time, the church was named Calloway after an early minister, Reverend Winston Calloway. A new church, in 1953, a parsonage was, land was given to our church by the Wilson Lodge. We had 2 members of our church who were members of the Wilson Lodge, and they gifted land to the church, and a parsonage was built on that land. In March of 1980, Calloway celebrated the remodeling of the complete church and an additional educational annex. Until 1965, the church was a member of the All-Black Baltimore-Washington Conference. And at that time, the church was named simply Calloway Methodist Church. In 1965, the church transferred to the North Carolina-Virginia Conference, and the church was renamed Calloway United Methodist Church. Currently, the church is a member of the Virginia Conference. Calloway is proud of the many events in their history. Most recently, in 2012, the Arlington County Board approved a local historic designation of the Calloway Cemetery, giving it the distinction of being the first African-American cemetery in Arlington to be officially studied and documented in depth by the county, and the first African-American cemetery in Arlington to be designated in its entirety as a historic district. We are currently preparing to upgrade the cemetery to include a wrought iron fence, benches, and a historical marker. For 150 years, Calloway has been a small church with a big heart. Like the other churches here this evening, Calloway has persevered during some very trying times in the lives of African Americans. Yet we continue to live out our mission, welcoming all people, growing in our faith, and connecting with our community. Thank you.
Okay, well, the first photo is of Bishop Lomax. He is our namesake. I'll tell you about how our church went through several iterations of names, but Bishop Lomax, when we first started, was our first bishop with the A.M.E. Zion Church, and in honor of him, Lomax was named for him. And tonight, we have his great-great-granddaughter sharing with us tonight, Marcia Clark. Marcia, can you identify yourself? She's very lovely. She is the great-great-granddaughter of Bishop Lomax. This is our first church that was constructed in Freedman's Village, and it was dismantled and moved when black Negroes had to leave Freedman's Village. Our first site, I have a presentation. I didn't know we were going to be going through there. I thought it was just going to be. But our first, okay, this is our first pulpit Bible. It is on display currently at the Arlington Historical Society through the end of February. Please go to see it. It's on Arlington Bridge Road. It was published in 1856, 10 years before our church was organized. And I found it in a file cabinet up in our church steeple. In the bottom drawers, we were preparing last year for our homecoming. I found it like 2 days before I was to give Mark the items for the exhibit at the Historical Society. It was just there, and it was labeled the first pulpit Bible, and it's up in the steeple, and it had been there. Some of the older members, somebody could tell me, I don't know, but I was flabbergasted when I found it. This is our first board of trustees. Reverend Killingsworth was our minister when our church was organized. Our second church was, when they left Freedman's Village, Reverend Killingsworth was our minister. His wife gave the $5 deposit to purchase the land, which was bought for $75, to move our church and relocate our church outside of Freedman's Village. That was in 1874, and they paid for it in 2 years. I go back, Mark, before I have to. Reverend Wallace Boswell was the man here. He identified the first site, the site of our current church. And I have to tell you, our church was dedicated in 1927, and in going through the documents for our history, I have a newspaper article that was published in 1927 when they dedicated our church. Our church is a connectional church, and the Sunday dedication was the person who gave the dedication that Sunday was Reverend Killingsworth's father, who was an A.M.E. Zion minister, had been in the ministry for 50 years, and he came up from South Carolina to give our dedication service in 1927. I think that's just priceless, and these are the men of our church. Wallace Boswell, honor grave is buried on as you're going in our church, his grave is under the steps as you enter our church. He has a hollow place in our history. Okay. This is our class leaders board from back in the day. I don't know exactly what year, but these are our forefathers who stand on such strong shoulders, hardworking people who did so much with so much less than we have today. The Class Leaders Board. This was our church school back in the day, up at the top, the Sunday school. And we have Barrett Christian Endeavor. This was back in the day, I think this is about from our 1949 program. Our children's choir, that's back in the mid-60s. I have to tell you, our musicians, we're noted for musicians. Everybody knows Roberta Flack went to Lomax. But we had other accomplished musicians. This is one of the Hargrove twins and Patsy Miller, who went on to be an opera singer. And she grew up in our church. One of our choirs, the Celestial Echoes, made an album. They celebrated 50 years, and this was their day. Give Us This Day. This is their album cover that they made back in the day. We had a Girl Scout troop. Some of you may recognize yourselves. Okay? Okay, or your family members. Okay, this was back in the mid-60s. The Home Missions Board is at the top, our Cub Scout pack, and this was our souvenir program. This was back in the 66 when we had our centennial program. That's from our program, and those are some of our boards from back then. In the March on Washington, without being a connectional church, we hosted people in our fellowship hall before the March on Washington in August 1968. And as a part of that, with connections, Reverend Martin Luther King spoke on our parking lot before the march, the day before the march. And this is a picture of our minister here, Reverend Walls, shaking hands with Reverend Abernathy and Dr. King there in the center on Lomax's parking lot. One of the things we're going to discuss is our involvement in the community. This was Reverend Lewis Hunter when we established a significant tutorial program in the county, and our education building was used to provide tutorial programs for children in the community. Okay. Reverend Dominic Muse, everyone, most of you know him. He owned the land adjacent to our church, and so this is the letter acknowledging that Mr. George W. Bullock Jr. purchased land. The next picture is the land that this was a house in the back of our church that was adjacent. Mr. Bullock purchased the land and held the option on the land for the church until the church was in a position to purchase the land, and that was what our backyard looked like before. That's a document, and Mr. G was our trustee and chairperson of the trustee board for years. But I got that letter from his family. They have a whole book of his contributions to that. But that's what the backyard of our church looked like before the parking lot was put in. Okay. Do I need to say anything? John Robinson was the mayor of Arlington. He was a member of our church. He never met a stranger from the time he finished high school. He helped everybody. He would come to your house whether you thought you needed help or not. He was there for everyone. And I dare say, back in the day when our community was having the drug problems and everything, I've heard he helped everybody from FBI agents to the police, local police, to local families that needed help. Whatever your need, he was there, and we could not. He was our doorkeeper for years also. He never missed a Sunday. He was there reading the children, everybody. He just never met a stranger, and he was a significant part of our congregation. we're black churches, and I would be talking about this, but with integration, everybody knows about the 4 students that integrated Stratford in 1959. I'm giving my presentation, so we may not go as we plan, but I have to tell this since it's coming up. Our church was established in 1866. Hoffman Boston High School was established to educate black children in 1916. We just celebrated the centennial last year also. 50 years, the church educated, served as a community center, school, as well as a church. In 1954, Brown versus Board of Education was passed for integration. 1959, the schools were integrated, quote unquote integrated. That meant that those 4 students in Sandra, we went to early in the early 60s, we went to Stratford. In 1965, they were supposedly integrated the school. I walked to Hoffman Boston Virginia Senior High School from the 7th through the 11th grade. My senior year class of 64, 65, I was bused to Wakefield. So integration, quote unquote, came to Arlington. This is a flyer from 1971 that our communities, North and South Arlington, had because our school board had a proposal that they did not want. This is what I'm saying, I'm not making this up. We have documents, it's in the Historical Society. The documents state that the school board had decided it wasn't necessary to have public hearings about integration, the integration of Drew Elementary and Hoffman Boston Elementary. They had decided that they did not want white children bused into the black community. These documents, official county documents, say that. As a result of that, the black ministers in our county, Reverend Walls at Lomax, Reverend Oswald G. Smith at Mount Zion, Reverend Sherman Phillips at Macedonia, Reverend Aaron Mackley from Mount Olive, Reverend Muse, as well as the attorneys. You know, in our community, we had doctors, lawyers, everybody did, attorneys, Lawyer Monroe, Lawyer Parker, Lawyer Alexander. They got together and they drafted a letter to the county board saying, we have the original documents, the original signatures of the people here, and Reverend Pearson was in there. These documents tell the school board that their proposal, number 4, to integrate Arlington schools was completely unacceptable. And at this point, we are coming demanding that you're changing it, and we are not coming with our hat in our hand. That statement is in the documents, it's on display there. 1971 is when this happened, and that flyer before was, they said in the documents that it is not necessary to have community meetings about this. We have decided that they didn't go to the community. So as a result, before faxes, we copied John, this is John's work. The community had a meeting about closing and dropping school off, and we had people, you know, the children from South Arlington had to be bused to far North Arlington to school, elementary school children, Drew and Hoffman Boston. And this was a flyer encouraging people to go. Okay, for a minute. And this is another resolution. I just encourage you to see that our ministers, our churches were organized and actively working on our behalf. You just don't know what was going on that level. Some of the parents who are here probably know, but the students, we didn't know. Reverend Walls was our minister for about 16, 17 years. He was the one that was active in the community and taking us through integration and fighting for the integration of the school. As a result of his involvement and leadership, he ran for the House of Delegates, for the Virginia State House of Delegates, and this is some of his campaign material. One of the things that, in terms of serving the community, when under Reverend Wall's administration, they decided that there was a need for affordable daycare for children in the North community. And as a result of that, they decided to build our education building. These two men, Charles and Robert Bryant, grew up as children in our church. Their sister is here tonight, Miss Frances Sellers. And they grew up, they were nurtured in Lomax, and they are the architects of our education building. They designed that building. It started out with our church members running it. Some of us here tonight work, I didn't work, but some of you here tonight work as high school students or something in our daycare center, and it is still there today, providing affordable child care in the North community. The church members ran it up to a point, and now it's under other leadership. This is the education building, and we have dedicated that about 7 or 8 years ago to Reverend Walls, and that's because it was his foresight to provide affordable daycare service to people there. Okay. In 1992, we were honored to have the first President Bush visit our congregation, and this is a picture of his shaking the hand of one of our late deaconesses, Mrs. Ruth Campbell. And that's our story: faith, endurance, and commitment. The legacy continues of Lomax A.M.E. Church.
Good evening. Truly a pleasure to be part of this august body this evening and to be here to present some of the information about the origins of Mount Zion Baptist Church. Before I get started, I would like to recognize several members of the Historic Commission who are in the audience this evening: Sister Ola Willoughby, Sister Florence Ross, and Sister Loretta Reed. Would you please stand, ladies? These ladies have been the glue that has allowed us to keep our history on page and together. Let's just start off by saying, because of the Emancipation Proclamation that was signed in January 1863, our research has shown that Freedman's Village was the site of a dedication that was held in the Old Bell Church. Now, Freedman's Village, as you know, was the first government-subsidized housing project in the United States. The village provided training, skills for employment. They provided employment on government farms. They provided food, shelter, medical care, and clothing for the contrabands. For those not familiar with the term contraband, it was a term that was used by the military during that period to identify escaped slaves or freed slaves that was affiliated with the military during that time, because slaves found freedom and safety near the Union forces. On December 4th, 1863, there was a dedication service at Freedman's Village. It was known, the location was the old, the Freedman's Chapel, which we believe was the Old Bell Church. At the ceremony, there was the Reverend was identified as Reverend Robert S. Laws. And Reverend Laws was a colored preacher who was recognized because he had built up the congregation within a year's time with an additional 100 people. So we can see our history dating prior to 1866, back to 1863. The Old Bell Church was the forerunner of Mount Zion Baptist Church. According to our research, we found out the Freeman's Village had an exponential growth in the years of 1864 to 1866. During that time, the population grew from several hundred to over 3,000 members. Due to the exponential growth and the limited resources, changes in political view by both the local and federal government, as well as unfavorable military rule, these conditions forced many of the residents to seek better living due to the unfair practices that they were dealing with. During the period of 1865 to 1877, a period that we call a radical reconstruction, the failure of Reconstruction, despite giving African Americans freedom, they also had to struggle during numerous years as second-class citizens. In 1866, as mentioned earlier, the Civil Rights Act of 1866 stated that the continued awful legacy of black codes denied full citizenship to African Americans and relegated them to second-class citizens. Mount Zion was formed under Robert S. Laws in 1866. Robert S. Laws was forced to leave Freedman's Village by the military general in charge because of his radical political and philosophical philosophy that he had in regards to the congregation that he shared with the members. In 1875, Reverend Joseph Matthews became the first minister of Mount Zion, and he served for 15 years. According to our research, in 1875, Mount and the Arlington Society, we believe that the wooden frame building that was on Freedman's Village collapsed and made Mount Zion move off to another site. In 1881, they purchased land on Mount Vernon Avenue in Arlington Heights. An article appeared in 1884 on the Alexandria Gazette indicating that the cornerstone was laid in the presence of a large congregation, and the ceremony of 50 African American Masons was performed by Reverend W.H. Scott of Boston, Mass. In 1886, on August 2nd, Mount Zion Baptist Church trustees paid Felix Mays $1,610.91 for materials and work to build a church on Mount Vernon Avenue. The congregation attempted to complete the work in December of 1886. However, it was not completed until January 1887, according to the newspaper's article. Reverend Matthews left Mount Zion in 1890 and became the first pastor of Mount Salvation in Arlington. One of the artifacts that we currently have from the first church was the old bell. And that was donated, we believe, in sometime in 1814, 1815. And that was used in the first building and the second building. And currently we'll be displaying that in Mount Zion next year. That's basically it.
Thank you very much. We have some questions that were developed to be asked, and so I want to start with Calloway. There are 4 questions. We may reduce them to 2. How were your churches impacted by the laws of segregation?
Like all black churches during the height of segregation, the church was one of the only safe places you could go to openly discuss the issues that you were being impacted by. And I think we should all remember that the civil rights movement started in the church. But an example for Calloway is in 1960, the Circuit Court of Arlington issued a condemnation decree to the state of Virginia to obtain land from Calloway to widen Lee Highway. And the members felt after all that they had been through to sacrifice to get the land, they were devastated. the 10 graves were removed from the cemetery, and the space became part of the highway. On a personal note, I can remember so vividly our annual trips to the beach every summer. And when we met at the church as a child, we met at the church, I can remember that the thing that the adults talked most about was going to the bathroom. They marched us to the bathroom 4 or 5 times before that bus left. And they would always say to us, you know, there's nowhere to go to the bathroom until you get to the beach. But I remember as a child sitting on that bus, watching that bus stop every year at a bus stop, and the white bus driver getting off, going to the bathroom. And I knew it was the bathroom because I could read. But it wasn't until later in life that I understood really what was going on. But I can imagine that most children in the Sunday school on that bus observed the same thing.
According to our research, we found that between the period of 1900 and 1945, because the encroaching development of African American communities, that Mount Zion was forced to move 2 times. Once from Mount Vernon Avenue and then over to Arlington Ridge Road, because it conflicted with local plans as well as the upcoming plans for Mount Vernon expansion of Mount Vernon Avenue and the Potomac bridge over the bridge over the Potomac River. This is called eminent domain. The government came in, first took it, moved us over to Arlington Ridge Road. Then they took it in regards to moving us because of the Pentagon. So Mount Zion was forced to build twice within a very short period of time, each time costing the members several $1,000s to go ahead and to move and replant the church. However, the church continued to have a significant role in the community. Because as a local church, people didn't have cars, the church became a central point within the community. And it continued that way under the 9 pastors that Mount Zion has had, including Reverend Laws. The congregation has really been impacted by the idea of continuing education, being relevant in regards to political and social issues affecting the community. And Mount Zion has taken pride in the development of their academic lessons that we continue to and share with our young children and other leaders.
Lomax in Arlington, we're in a country that although we were freedmen, quote unquote, you've heard the history of our country and our Constitution considered us 3/5 of a man through the years. And actually, as we sit here today, we are really feeling the impact of that law because the Electoral College was developed to address the fact that black men, although they were freedmen, they were just 3/5 of the men. So our church is 150 years old, and in 2017, we are feeling the impact of the laws of the United States on our community. And so we have always had to be separate but equal. What does that mean? I was in schools. I went to Hoffman Boston, I went to Drew and Hoffman Boston, and to Wakefield. And I have several classmates here tonight. We can tell you when we open it up that we had books, materials that had been used by the children in the white schools, and they were handed down. They were labeled, the names were in it, the dates, everything, but we had handed down used books in our schools. That was, our churches were fighting on our behalf for us to get the best education that we could. Our church served worship service on Sunday. It served as school, during the week before they had public education, and it served the purpose for community meetings for our community, because we had to be a full-service community because we were both separate but equal. Through the years, though, I must say that the members of Lomax, and I dare say the other churches, I just don't know the details of the other churches, some of the individual members reached out individually through the organizations to integrate. When I was in junior, senior high school, I can remember that I went to the Unitarian Church for vacation Bible school one summer. I can still remember I took a cooking class and they taught me how to cut an onion so your eyes wouldn't run, you know? I still know, supposedly. And I think that that was through the efforts of the ladies in our church, through Church Women United. I'm not sure, Ms. Beatrice Ritchie, some of you may be able to speak to that. But I think that that was, although we were segregated, individually, the churches and the people got together to give us opportunities to interact with each other so that we could appreciate the fact, our commonness and whatever our differences were. Also, our Reverend Callis, one of our ministers, Reverend Henry Callis, who was our minister between 1934 to 1946, he was the first black minister to join the interdenominational council of ministers. So I don't know exactly what year it was, but he left us in 1946. So during his pastorate, he was doing that. So although we were segregated by the laws, efforts were made for us to integrate.
Thank you very much. We've heard in the presentations tonight that each of the churches were the hubs for their communities. Could each of you speak to that? And we'll resume with you, Brenda from Lomax.
I'm so glad you asked. Lomax A.M.E. Zion Church served as the meeting place for the Arlington branch of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, NAACP, for 30 years. Our fellowship hall was the meeting place to fight segregation in Arlington County. When we had our anniversary in 1999, just before the turn of the century, the longtime president of the NAACP, Mr. Robert McGregor, made the comment at our church banquet that if these walls could talk, I don't know the stories, but we can't imagine. Also, a lot of as the civil rights movement came and there were advances to try to integrate public accommodations in the schools and everything, those arrangements were made. NAACP was like the hub of it at Lomax, and as such, it was known throughout the black and the white community. And back in the 60s, the American Nazi Party had their headquarters here in the George Lincoln Rockwell in Clarendon, somewhere uptown or whatever. And rumor has it that our church was targeted to be burned or bombed, and our men had to spend several nights of whatever was going on during that time, armed to protect our church. So our church was the hub. I mean, that just epitomizes the fact of what Lomax is, the role that Lomax served during the civil rights movement in the community. Thank you.
Okay, the teacher's going to come at me right now, but I won't take all your time. And when we speak of a hub, think of a wheel. The center of the wheel is the hub. In our situation, on our wheel, Mount Zion Baptist Church. And from that wheel and the hub, on the wheel, from the hub are spokes. beginning with Robert S. Laws, on up to Dr. Leonard N. Smith. The spokes grew, and they grew according to the number, according to the increased population in the community, the changes in the community, the growth in our church, the number of auxiliaries and ministries in our church. And I'm going to cut it right there.
All right, thank you.
In our communities, during that time, the church was more than likely the largest facility that we had. So the African American schools were pretty small, and a lot of them did not have an auditorium. So a lot of the events that were related to the school actually took place at the church. The graduations of all the classes from Langston was held at Calloway. There was a kindergarten, preschool program, a Mother Goose kindergarten, that was held at Calloway for parents that worked and had young children. The other thing, we served as a community center. On Friday nights in Highview Park, all the teenagers would come to Calloway to see the movies. We had this big reel-to-reel, the trustees bought this movie projector and a big screen, and every Friday night, all the teenagers and youngsters would gather in Calloway to see the movies. They'd have popcorn and candy and hot dogs. So it was a community center because we had no other place to go. One of the other things is the lawn parties that the churches had. During the summer months, the women of the church would cook food, and it was a fundraiser. But you'd come out and you'd share your food, and the kids would play games, and the adults would socialize. So I think that because there wasn't any other place to go, the church was truly a hub in all of our communities.
Thank you so much. Because I want to make sure that we have adequate time for audience participation, I'm going to skip to question number 4. And each of you will have an opportunity to make some closing remarks. So number 4, the last question for the panel members tonight will be, over the years, the communities in Arlington have changed. What has that meant for your church? Let's start with Mount Zion.
Over the 24 years that I've been at Mount Zion, I've witnessed the change of the Arlington community. I've seen how gentrification has taken a major role in changing the population of South Arlington as well as North Arlington. The community has changed. Individuals are now paying more in taxes. Services aren't as great as they used to be, but we keep chugging along. You know, Mount Zion has been committed to the spiritual growth and the emotional needs of the community as well as their members. Our ministries are more geared for outreach, both locally and globally. We go far beyond our walls these days. Communities have increasing needs that Mount Zion is able to come back and to address both for those who may need care and those who may need ministry support. Mount Zion has, over the years, increased its budget to make sure that we're able to go ahead and take care of those individuals that come to us in need. It means a lot to us as a church to be able to go and expand beyond the walls. And Mount Zion has done that and will continue to do it in the 21st century.
And also I would like to add that we even, in our Bible Institute, at one point, we were offering Spanish 1, since our community has changed. And we were offering Spanish classes, computer technology classes. as well?
I would say that times have changed. Computerization has changed, and the community, as it was when I was growing up, is really not as cohesive a community as it was. People are branching out now with media. People are able, from whatever, ministers on the radio or whatever, so you have a much broader community, so we are not as focused as a community, as our church. In our church, we still have our ministries, the missionaries, and we have a seniors ministry that reaches out to address the needs of the community. But I'd like to make this point. You know, traditionally, 11 o'clock Sunday morning is the most segregated hour in the country. But individuals are slowly breaking that wall down. When they had the shootings in Charleston, South Carolina, about a year and a half ago, there was a really interesting response from the community. The Sunday after the shootings, our church received cards of sympathy. We received, I think it may be 1 or 2 vases of flowers left on our steps. And one member of our community who is here tonight, of the community, a member of St. Michael's Episcopal Church in North Arlington, felt a need to worship in a black church. So she called Lomax and asked if it would be all right to come to worship there. And her name is Ann Jacoby. Ann, raise your hand or stand up if you're able to. Ann. As a result of her stepping out on faith, St. Michael's and Lomax has formed an ad hoc, kind of informal fellowship, and since then, since 2015, our senior ministry and the ladies groups at St. Michael's have been exchanging fellowship with each other throughout the year. They come to our church and we go to theirs. At some point in the day that we're living in, we need more people who are willing to step out on faith and just be a leader of that, because we still have our black communities and whatever, gentrification is coming. But I think that I would have to say that we're talking about black churches, and that is something that it's a change. It was a change. I was struck by the fact that anonymous people from the community felt a need to express their concern to us, their sympathy to us during that time, and I really appreciated the fact that Ann took it upon herself to come and worship with us. So times are slowly changing, and we as believers need to, I would think, need to just be more cognizant of it, of what's going on.
Thank you. Sandra?
While we're still located in the community of Highview Park, most of our members do not live in the community. And like all of the other black communities, our community has changed, and we're all experiencing gentrification. At our church, we are currently, as I speak, we are evaluating all aspects of our ministries and our structure to ensure that we can continue to live out our mission of welcoming all people, growing in faith, and connecting in the community.
My name is Tom Dickinson. I'd like to thank all the speakers here tonight for this wonderful chapter of Arlington's very important and essential African American history. It's just amazing to hear these stories. As sure as I'm standing here, though, I know I would be struck down by a bolt of lightning by the spirits of people like Mrs. Thadinia West and Jim Powell and Jenny Davis and a whole host of other people who were parishioners at Our Lady Queen of Peace in Arlington, where I've been a parishioner since 1981. Arlington's first and only African-American Catholic church. And I see my good friend Veronica Dabney over here, and Veronica's history goes back to the beginning. She was baptized and raised in the church and so on and so forth, and she's got a lot of history. But the one thing that's always impressed me that's common to everything that you all said tonight about your churches is that these things would not have happened if it hadn't been for the hard work and dedication and persistence of a small group of people. It was just a dozen people in 1945 who got together and decided that they wanted to have a Catholic church, an African-American Catholic church in Arlington. And they donated the time, they donated the land, they donated the labor, all the materials to build that church. And you all have that same kind of story to tell. No one came to you and said, oh, we want you to build a church here in Arlington. We want you to do this and that. You did it from yourself. It came from within. And the only explanation for that is divine intervention. Divine intervention. So thank you all.
Thank you, and let's recognize, please, the other churches that are here tonight. If you can just stand, if you're not from Mount Zion, Lomax, or Calloway, we appreciate the support tonight. Oh, okay. Thank you very much for coming out tonight. I saw a hand over here.
Yes, my name is Max Gross. I'm a member of the society. I have two questions. One, what is the membership number of each of your church? Not the number that comes every Sunday, because I know that's different, but your overall membership. And also my second question is, how much do you interact with one another as churches?
Lomax and Calloway, you can begin with your
Calloway
numbers.
is the smallest church sitting on the podium. And I'm going to guess that our membership is 200, which is what it will be. About 150, that's our membership.
The other question is, how much do these three churches interact with each other? Is that correct?
We don't interact the way that we used to interact. We used to have much more interaction than we do now. I remember we used to have, at Christmas time, all of the black churches would come together with Upland Boston School and have a Christmas celebration. And we would, at the end of that program, sing the Hallelujah Chorus with all of the choirs. I remember that we used to go to different churches for vacation Bible school. We interacted much more in the past than we do now.
Specifically, and I can be corrected, I think at this point we get together on Good Friday and have a joint service, maybe Martin Luther King Day. It's usually, I thought it was 2 days that we usually as a church get together, a community get together, Martin Luther King and Good Friday, we have joint services. And I think that Lomax, we have about, what, 210, 220? That's about the size of our congregation, yeah.
The size of Mount Zion Baptist Church, 3,000. And during the summer, the local churches in South Arlington, we would find out when each church was having vacation Bible school. And so we would plan our vacation Bible school according to everyone's date so that we could participate. And if you remember those, we would participate with you guys too. You further north, right? But nevertheless, our vacation Bible school, we did a lot, and like you said, with Dr. King Day and the usher ministries. We would travel to the different churches that in the Arlington area. Our Ushers Association.
Revival. Don't forget about revivals.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Someone in the background said revivals. Yes, our revivals. Can I do something out of order? Just, you remember you mentioned about your church was threatened?
Yeah.
Our church was threatened, but our church had the cross burned on it. And we didn't get a chance to talk about question number 3, but I wanted to put that in there. Yeah, we were threatened. And they threatened us with a cross burning on our property. Oh, that was after integration. Question.
I'd like to really thank all of you
in your presentation, because I think your presentations were very educationally informative. I think you were historically accurate, and I think the range was very broad. I have three questions. Is that I got one for Mount Zion, and that question is as follows. You mentioned that there was like an explosion in the population by 1864. What factors do you attribute that to? Do you think it's due to the mass migration of African Americans from the South that might be attributed to, or do you think it was that plus something else?
No, I agree. It was the as a result of the Emancipation Proclamation. A lot of blacks moved into the Washington area, Washington, Virginia, Maryland area. And with Freedman's Village having overpopulation, that was a significant factor for them to come into this area and to reside in this area. They found work here. It was because of the federal government, because of the military, they were able to go ahead and get gainfully employed. There was a rather liberal policy politically which encouraged individuals to purchase land. And I think that's what caused the exponential growth.
Okay, I got a question for all three. Is that most of you are aware of the fact that in 1964 the Voting Rights Act was passed. Last year it went off the books. I mean, what are your thoughts about that? And in terms of, do you think it had an impact on the recent election? And what position did the church have a position on that? And if they did, what was the position?
Can you elaborate a little bit about?
Well, you know, in 1964, you know, that basically, I think under President Lyndon Johnson, they passed the Voting Rights Act, which gave everybody the right to vote. And I think that law lasts for a certain period of time. I think it's 50 years, which would make it 50 added to that would be 2016. So 2016, under the Congress, they just allowed the act to expire. I mean, and you know, it really, you know, the reason why the act was put on the books is to really prevent, you know, the disenfranchisement of people when it comes to voting. You know, some people still think that those factors are still in place right there. Thus, the Voting Rights Act should have been extended. You know.
Sorry, I was going over you to get that mic.
Yeah, sorry, it's the American history prof in me. The Voting Rights Act passed in 1965 does not expire. It's still on the books, but the Supreme Court several years ago changed and said basically, and I'll go over simply, because segregation was not a problem anymore, states that had a historic pattern of discrimination in voting laws had to have any changes in voting laws pre-passed by the Department of Justice. The Supreme Court several years ago then, 2 or 3 years ago, said you no longer had to do that. And so states that had a historic pattern of discrimination, mostly, of course, against African Americans in the Deep South. What I also point out, my students, South Dakota's in there too, because they did the same things, poll tax and everything else against Native American voters. That was removed. The law is still on the books, but states no longer have to go through the Department of Justice before they change their voting laws, which means if they pass a law that has an effect against a particular community to make it harder for them to vote, now then the Department of Justice has to take them to court. And that added a whole nother set of hurdles. It's still on the books. It's just that part was changed by the Supreme Court that added the extra hurdles. Sorry, what's your vote? It's American history problem on campus.
The only thing I could think of to speak to that from Lomax, I know in Virginia there were concerns about ex-offenders being able to vote. And our church had an active campaign to go out and identify ex-offenders and work with them to get them the right to vote. And, you know, some of our ministers undertook that as, our assistant ministers undertook that as a project. I don't know the success of that, but that was one of the things that, the way we addressed voting rights in the last election.
At Mount Zion, we, for the last couple of years, we've had the election board come in, and they actually do recruiting and pass out information and do sign up for individuals within the congregation who may need to go ahead and sign up for voting. So with the large congregation that we do have, that's been something that we've been doing on a regular basis.
At Calloway, you know, I think the Methodists, the United Methodists, really separate church from state. We don't have a lot of discussion about that like we used to do in our church, but the membership, there are members that belong to other organizations in the community that really work with voter education and voter rights. The Halls Hill Highway Park Historic Preservation Committee coalition last year worked with the ex-offenders as well. And we held voter registration at Langston, and actually, because we knew some ex-offenders, we understood what their rights were and sat there while they were registered to vote. It wasn't done from the church, but church members are still active in the hall.
Okay, thank you.
My name is Jerry Laporte, and my question is for Mr. Henderson. You referred to the fact that Mount Zion originated at the Old Bell Chapel, and I was wondering exactly what the Old Bell Chapel was. Was that the Lee family chapel on the Arlington estate, or was that a different building?
The American Missionary Association was the group that was responsible for providing services in Freeman's Village. The chapel was their chapel, but Mount Zion did build another structure there, and they did use the same structure over a period of time. And again, according to our research in 1875, the wooden structure collapsed while they were trying to build it, which was a precursor for us moving off to Mount Vernon Avenue.
There was, I don't remember if you covered this, where was Freedman Village actually located?
Freedman's Village is located on the Lee Curtis Custis property, which is now the Henderson Hall, Arlington Cemetery, and to that northern part of where the annex is, Henderson Mount Hall Annex.
Okay, basically Arlington National Cemetery. Any other business for us from Mount Zion?
Yes, my name is Ross, and I just have a couple of reflections. And I don't want to be redundant because all of you have touched on some of the things that were going through my mind as you spoke. I was baptized at the new Mount Zion the Sunday that it was dedicated, July 1st, 1945. I've been in Mount Zion all my life. I was baptized by the late Reverend James E. Green. And at that time, that particular day, I remember, with many other people, young people and elderly people who were baptized, I don't know, 20 or 30 people. We had morning worship service, baptism, dinner. You stayed for 3:30 service, and you were probably there for an 8 o'clock service. But back in the day, you didn't have TV. And so the church, we grew up, your home, your school, and then your church. The church was the knit that held all families together. And it was the social place. As you said, Friday night you had fish fries or whatever. But all day Sunday and even Sunday evening, it was worship. And we learned not the lessons of the academics of reading and presenting things, and we had fun. We had the summer parties, as you said, the lawn parties. And I just remember the one day, because we didn't have beaches and people didn't have cars. One day a year, you got to go to the beach on the bus. The same thing that Mrs. Green mentioned. During the desegregation of schools, I was an adult then and my children were involved, and it was a very trying time in Arlington. The school board set its rules. But what was so blessed was that the pastors and churches, the black churches, they opened up the church, no charge, especially Reverend Mackley at Mount Olive. Whenever the parents got together and there was an issue that we couldn't solve, we couldn't meet in the school and talk about the school board, so we had comfortable meetings at the churches. And I remember, since Mount Olive is not here, but he was one of the main ones. He just said, everybody come whenever you want to settle an issue. Come to the church, come here. And I was so glad when Ms. Cox showed that document, because my pastor at that time was Dr. Oswald G. Smith, and he had lost his hearing. And because of that, he couldn't communicate publicly. But he supported the pastors, and they gave him, like that document, if he read it and he signed it, he knew what it was about, because we kept him informed. To me, that was interesting. We may not have done all the things that Lomax did, but it was because I think of his disability of not hearing. The next thing it came to me as an outreach with our current pastor, Dr. Leonard N. Smith. He conceived the idea of churches coming together for Martin Luther King's birthday. So Mount Zion partnered with the United Universal Church in Arlington and the Unitarian Church, and Our Lady Queen of Peace Catholic Church. And for many years, we socialized Mount Zion. The three churches were together and we did different things. And even now, some of the Sunday school children still attend special services at Mount Zion as a part of their outreach. They come over. So I think we've all been involved at one point or other, and as John said, the neighborhoods, they are changing. One time everyone lived in the neighborhood, people didn't have vehicles, so everybody walked to church. Mount Zion, I don't know about the others, but most of our families are outside of our church proper. Everybody drives in, so you have people coming long distances. As soon as the service is over, they're headed back home to Stafford, Woodbridge, Haymarket, Largo, wherever. But I'd like to say, as a member of Mount Zion's Historic Commission with Mrs. Wilson, Ms. Reed and I, to thank the host tonight, to thank the moderator and the speakers on the panel for this historic event. And I'd like to take a little time, a moment, to introduce Dr. Nancy Perry, because I'd like for you to know this young lady. In a dissertation when she was working at George Mason University, she has written a paper on the displacement of the black community and black churches to build the Pentagon. And it is online, and all of us, everybody should go online and read that paper.
Willow B., Mount Zion Baptist Church, and I just want to commend all of those who made presentations tonight and to say that it's been very, very revealing to all of us here, and those especially who did not know about the relationship between the churches, perhaps. I'd just like to make a comment with regard to some of the activities that have been held at Mount Zion. For a period of time, we had wonderful tutorial program at Mount Zion. We met regularly, and most of the participants were from this elementary schools. We had a number of them from high school, but was highly successful. And the idea came from the NAACP in Arlington. And at that time, there was a Mrs. Connie Sullivan, I think I believe that she was at Wakefield High School, and she was instrumental in coming in and assisting us. We ran it, and it was, as I said before, very successful. The students made progress, and not only that, but in 1957, Mount Zion added to the church by building an M1, what we call M1 building, and that was used as a children's church. And that was very, very successful also. And we never restricted any of the activities that we had at church from other students coming in and participating. And I like the relationships that we've had with the other churches in the community. Although we may not mingle and have regular services on Sundays, we do have large participation when we have our breakfasts, the prayer breakfasts, the fashion shows and luncheons that we once had. We support, I get support from all of the churches. And it's a very good fellowship, I think. And not only that, but Mount Zion did, when Reverend Leonard Smith came aboard, go to down to Green Valley, and I think there was a picnic or a one-day activity there. I think that was mentioned by one of our presenters. And I also want to commend them for representing us so well. We're very highly pleased that you did. There's a lot more that I wanted to say about it, but I think now I have said enough because I know that there are other people who want to talk. So.
I was just given a note that the staff leaves at 9 p.m. So unfortunately, we cannot continue much longer. What time is it now? 4 minutes to 9. We've got 5 minutes. Anyone with anyone else? Thank you, Mrs. Willoughby, and thank you, Mrs. Ross. Okay.
I just wanted to let you know that to piggyback on Ms. Willoughby and Ms. Reed were one of my mentors and teachers. And I just want you to know, Ms. Willoughby, I was going to mention the things you said, but they didn't go with question number 2, so don't be asking me what I said.
I think some of it's been addressed. Thank you. I think we need to, we have to be out by 9. Okay. I also want to thank the Historical Society, in case I don't get another chance to, and all of our all of you for coming out tonight. And I know it's been a learning experience for all of us, and we appreciate you sharing. And Carl, thank you so much. And
I just have to thank Arlington Historical Society for supporting this. I cannot thank you enough for doing this on behalf of the Black churches. I want to thank Mark. I want to thank Jennifer Shaw, who was the person on duty that heard my plea that there were churches in Arlington turning 150, and our history is the history of Arlington. It's not Black history, it is the history of Arlington County, and I thank you so much for supporting this.
thank you to the committee. And again to the panelists tonight. Excellent, excellent presentations, wonderful information, and I'm turning it over to Mr. Carl Van Newkirk.
Well, I would like to thank all of you for coming and to say I appreciate the kind words which you have said, but this was a joint effort among many, many people, and it wasn't just our organization. As I said earlier, the Arlington Historical Society will present programs on the second Thursday of every month. There's a schedule of the upcoming ones over on the table right over there. And there's also some information about the Historical Society if you'd be interested in learning more about it or joining the society. And also some flyers about one of our museums, the Ball Sellers House, the oldest house in Arlington. Thank you all. Drive safely. Good night.